You've got to keep reinventing. You'll have new competitors. You'll have new customers all around you. Yet, Monster Beverage Corporation's 2021 strategy feels uninspired. The US energy drinks market is arguably the most competitive beverage subcategory. It reached around $15 billion in total sales in the US market in 2020, despite the COVID-19 effect almost stunting the business during those early months of the pandemic when consumer mobility creeped down to almost zero, essentially then cutting off the largest sales channel for energy drinks, which is fuel and convenience retailers. And Monster Beverage, or just Monster Energy, has been the number 2 brand in the energy drinks market behind Red Bull for almost all of the 2000s. That being said, complacency is the worst thing that you could do within the energy drinks market, and Monster Beverage honestly saw that firsthand when they were kind of sleeping at the wheel when Bang Energy kind of came out of nowhere, and by the time they created a defensive product strategy, it was a little bit too late. Bang had already reached well beyond any other energy drink brand had done over the last decade. So just having that be fresh in their mind, why is their 2021 strategy that was just unveiled during their annual shareholders meeting making me feel kind of blah? So this piece of content is going to be a little bit different than normal, and that's because generally I'm focusing on like what is past the product. I'm assuming that these big companies, their product meets or far exceeds the market's expectation. And because of that, it's really what builds off of their product that makes them special. Now, Monster Beverage Corporation actually does a lot of that stuff extremely well. So I'm actually going to flip this on its head and talk mostly around like product strategy and product innovation for 2021. But just for like completeness of this content, I will breeze through some of that like marketing, advertising, promotional partnership area that they do so well. And for those watching this on YouTube, I also included visuals provided by Monster Beverage in their investor presentation. Overall, Monster Energy has stayed consistent in its marketing, sales, promotions as a share of the revenue for the last few years. So that means they're not necessarily needing to be overly aggressive in the environment despite the increased competition, giving off the impression that the brands are still strong and resonating with customers. Monster Energy has always had a bit of a bad boy, kind of extreme sports vibe to its marketing, and that has continued over the last year and into 2021. Monster Energy sponsors large sports leagues like NASCAR, UFC, MotoGP, the X Games, the PBR, and a few others. They also sponsored champions in just about every sport that they align themselves with, including Formula One with Lewis Hamilton and several names and teams within the MotoGP world. They're also still going extremely strong in the UFC with both mat placements and individual fighters' clothing. They've expanded that a little bit outside of the UFC as well into some of the other fighting leagues like Bellator. One of the areas I really like them marketing to more aggressively over the last few years has been the esports market, which I believe will overtake many of the major sports organizations in the future as the most watched and participated in by youth. They also do a good job at focusing on areas like Latin music and Hispanic festivals, hip hop and sneaker culture, and many other like individual areas and having influencers or events or partnerships that target specific customer groups that don't necessarily get spoken to directly a lot with national modal advertising. You also see them doing a great job at defining each Monster product extension, or I think they call them families, target groups with content, campaigns, influencers, and a number of other ways. And just kind of running through each one of these particularly, you have the Java Monster, which is essentially coffee with an attitude. They have the Ultra line, which is my personal favorite. That is basically full flavor with zero sugar. They have a Juice Plus line, and that is taking flavor to the limits. They have Hydro, which has kind of splintered off into two offerings now, which is hard charging hydration geared towards more of the athletics, and they sponsor Tiger Woods and Rob Gronkowski. And then their Reign Performance Energy product that was really a big focus throughout 2019 and 2020. That is Total Body Fuel, which is focused primarily on the fitness and health arena. So just jumping back into the product innovation or like competitive landscape discussion, I think there's really like two scenarios that could be pretty prominent over the next 18 months. Now, scenario number one, some of those assumptions within a scenario one that I'm talking about is that PepsiCo and the Bang Energy exclusive partnership will really not get worked on. Even if it doesn't break up, it's just not going to really work. So it's going to be those brands really spinning their wheels. PepsiCo also not really being able to either get off the ground their Mountain Dew different offerings. They have a ton of different Mountain Dew offerings right now, and they're launching a new one with Rise Energy that LeBron James is going to be the kind of face of. PepsiCo also not being able to really like materially transform and kind of reinvent the Rockstar brand. The belief that like upstart brands like Celsius, C4 Energy, Ghost Lifestyle, Alani Nu won't become big enough in the next 18 months to really make a material difference. And then everything stays the same within the Coca-Cola Monster kind of partnership / ownership structure. So basically, if the majority of those assumptions come true, that's kind of where scenario one kind of looks like. And honestly, I think Monster Beverage Corporation is really leaning into that scenario one being the case, because if you look at their product strategy, it seems that they're leaning into basically staying the course that they had throughout 2020. So essentially you have pedestrian level flavor launches in their top sub brands. Kind of the same thing that's happening on the Reign Performance Energy side. You also have them introducing a smaller pack size, and they're essentially saying that is for convenience, food service, and on-premise. I think they're taking kind of a big leap to believe that food service and on-premise is going to really rebound in 2021, but they are already creating that 12-ounce can for a few other markets, I think, and also maybe some in the US and select markets. For me, I think I would save the aluminum and really focus just on that 16-ounce. I would save that for another year. They are focusing on international expansion, specifically with Reign. I think that's going to roll out internationally, globally in 2021. And they're really focusing on increasing sub-brand strengths for more use occasions. And you'll see that they're doing a refresh on some of their packaging designs. I don't necessarily think there was a need to do a lot of those things, especially at the small level that they did do them at. I think if they were going to make a packaging change, they should have made probably a more extensive one like Rockstar did with their rebrand in 2021. And honestly, it reminds me a lot of the refresh I was a part of on the Zions energy drink brand before it was acquired by Keurig Dr. Pepper. Now, while this strategy will obviously produce consistent growth like Monster Beverage Corporation has had over the last decade, I don't believe it's going to cut it if we're talking about what scenario two is going to look like. Now, scenario number two, some of the assumptions that would need to come true for this scenario to really play out in the market would be some of the opposites of what I was talking about in scenario one, with PepsiCo and Bang Energy either kind of coming together and really working on that partnership distribution contract and that being able to produce some results, or Bang Energy ends up getting a buyout and they end up then getting back aggressive in the market by themselves. Also, PepsiCo getting the Rockstar Energy brand off the ground and growing again, or PepsiCo being able to really grow their Mountain Dew brands, a lot of the sub-brands, they have that, specifically the new Rise Energy one that's going to be coming out in 2021. Also the belief that some of those emerging brands that I mentioned before, so the Celsius, the C4, the Ghost, the Alani Nu, continue to double or triple in revenue and really become major players in the industry. And then because of all that kind of happening, Coca-Cola needed to get aggressive in the market and deciding what they're going to do with that partnership, ownership of Monster Beverage Corporation. So it's really the latter, that last thing, that's going to potentially cause the most problems for Monster Beverage Corporation with their inactivity or just them not being extremely aggressive. Because there's a lot of sequences that could come up with that last thing that could create a lot of issues for the Monster Beverage Corporation. The odds of them completely losing the distribution, which would be the worst case scenario for Monster Beverage Corporation, would be as close to zero as possible. I wouldn't put it at zero, but I think it's so astronomically low that this commentary really doesn't have all that much weight, other than just to think that the option is still available. But I think additionally, outside of just not potentially having that national distribution from Coca-Cola, is that during the early months of the pandemic, because they did have to lean so heavily on the Coca-Cola distribution network, their sales teams, Coca-Cola ended up grounding all of those employees, which really hurt Monster Beverage Corporation. Instead of somebody like Red Bull, the leading brand that has their own independent sales team, their own independent distribution, they were still out there working, pushing product, and they were the brand that was growing during those months when everybody else was struggling. So I was really looking at the Monster Beverage Corporation to have inspired, aggressive activity within 2021, especially because they no longer have their non-compete with Coca-Cola anymore in terms of the categories in which they can create. They no longer just have to create energy drink products. They can create any beverage products or own any beverage type of categories. So I think, though they didn't announce a lot of those more aggressive innovation plans, I do think they have a few of those that will happen in 2021, be that announcements or rollouts, but they have to play a little bit coy right now. But just kind of mentioning maybe where they could go with some of that innovation strategy over the next year, 18 months, I think you could see a trio of alcoholic type beverages. The first one and the most obvious one that seems to be talked about publicly is the hard seltzer category. I think you also could see some malt beverage type products, or a kind of coffee plus alcohol combination, because there's kind of a loophole that they are not allowed to make an energy drink plus alcohol, but they can make a coffee plus alcohol. So I think Monster Beverage Corporation takes advantage of that. I think they're going to need to have a beer or alcohol distributor. I think they probably lean on AB InBev or Molson Coors in this situation. Monster Beverage Corporation also needs to create a substantial JV partnership with some marijuana company, production company, and really got to set themselves up for what could happen in terms of further decriminalization or legalization, especially under the Biden and Democratic run Congress. So over the next year or two, a lot of things could change. You really need to make sure you're positioned correctly to turn that switch on when you're able to do those things federally. Monster Beverage Corporation also needs to create a defensive product strategy against Celsius or just kind of other clean energy products. I believe the Monster Beverage Corporation leadership has this dead wrong in terms of not thinking the next year or two this is going to be a big enough category for them to even care about or pay attention to. I think that's going to be a big mistake. It's going to be another mistake that they are going to look back on and say, this is something we should have learned our lesson from Bang Energy, but we haven't. So hopefully, if anybody's listening from the Monster Beverage Corporation, I plead with you that you should take these clean energy products seriously, as I'm going to project it's going to be between 5 and 10% of the energy beverage market in the next 18 months. I also think the Monster Beverage Corporation could create another kind of sparkling water plus caffeine, a little bit lighter, good flavors, something similar to like the Coca-Cola's AHA product. I think that could be like a non-alcoholic sparkling beverage that could work out as well. And I would look at some additional mergers and acquisitions, targets in functional beverage categories that make sense. And I'm really looking at the Monster Beverage Corporation to kind of do the yin to the yang type of a scenario here, is that, you have a lot of these energy products, but eventually, and I think this is starting to happen now, is that people are looking at, how do I come down from that stimulation? How do I come down from all that extra energy? Like, what's the inverse of this? And I think it is like that relaxation, sleep, stress reduction, all of those types of products, ingredients that could create a good inverse to what they provide as being the number 2 energy beverage portfolio in the world. Now we'll see if we get some additional information in the next earnings report, earnings call for Monster Beverage Corporation that happens in about a month from now, if they're able to maybe release some of those innovation strategy plans. But it's clear to me that the Monster Beverage Corporation needs to kind of step out of its comfort zone to ensure that they are best positioned within the beverage industry of the future. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help support me, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button on this video. If this is the first time you've been introduced to my videos, would love for you guys to be a part of my community by subscribing to my channel. I upload several videos just like this weekly. And if you guys want to connect further outside of this platform, I do include all of my social media links down below. I just want to thank you guys again for your time. Hopefully I gave you some value in return, and we'll see you guys on the next video.